The Snow Queen. There was once a mirror belonging to a magician. It made everything look ugly and twisted, no matter how beautiful it really was. One day the mirror broke, and thousands of tiny pieces went flying across the world. Some flew into people's eyes and made everything look spoiled and dirty. Others were tiny sharp slivers that flew into people's hearts. They turned them to ice, so that they could not feel love and happiness anymore. Meanwhile, a little girl and boy who lived opposite each other were playing happily high above the busy street. Their houses almost touched, and there were window boxes on the top floor. In the summer, the little girl, who was called Gerda, and the little boy, who was called Kay, played together in their tiny garden. In the winter, when the windows were shut, they watched the snowflakes swirling through the window like a flock of bees. "There is a queen of the snow just as there is a queen bee," said Grandmother. "She is the biggest snowflake whirling in the storm." That evening, when Kay was getting ready for bed, he peered through the window and saw one large snowflake landing on the window box. Before his eyes it seemed to grow into a beautiful woman, dressed all in white. Kay knew that she was the Snow Queen, but he turned back to his warm little bed. The next day, when Kay and Gerda were playing outside, Kay suddenly gave a little cry. "Oh," he said, "I just felt a sharp pain in my heart, as if something stabbed me. And it felt as though something flew into my eye, too. But I feel better now." Tiny pieces of the magician's mirror were now lodged in Kay's eye and heart, which was turned to ice. Seeing Gerda's worried little face, Kay spoke coldly. "What's the matter with you, Gerda? You don't look at all pretty like that. I'm going off to play with other boys in the square." In the square there was thick snow. As Kay sat on his sled, a magnificent full-sized sleigh swept into the square. In a flash, Kay stretched out his hands and grabbed hold of the sleigh, so that he was pulled along behind it. As the sleigh flew over the fields, the snow swirled thicker around Kay. He began to be rather frightened. At last the strange sleigh stopped, and the white figure driving it stood up. Kay could see that it was the Snow Queen, dressed in a cloak of white fur. Kay was no longer afraid, but flew on with her in the moonlight. Back in the city, little Gerda learned that Kay had disappeared. Everyone said that he must be dead, but Gerda could not believe that. As soon as spring arrived, she set off to find Kay in her new red shoes. Gerda soon reached the countryside. Before long she saw a large orchard full of cherry trees, and an old woman wearing a straw hat covered with flowers. Gerda was glad to see a friendly face. Soon she had told the woman about Kay. "I haven't seen him, but you can stay here and wait," said the woman. In fact, the old woman really wanted to look after a little girl just like Gerda. She was careful to magic away all the roses in her garden, so that Gerda was not reminded of home. But the old lady had forgotten about her hat. One day Gerda noticed that one of the flowers on it was a rose. "Oh no," cried the little girl. "I have wasted so much time." Without even waiting to put on her shoes, Gerda ran out of the garden. Her feet were soon sore, so she sat down to rest near a large raven. "I may have seen Kay," said the raven, "but he has forgotten you. He thinks only of the princess." "Is he living with a princess?" asked Gerda. Then the raven told her about a princess who was very clever. She advertised for a husband, and before long the castle was packed with young men lining up to see her. Unfortunately, when they came into her presence, all of them were too overcome to say a word, so she sent them away. "But what about Kay?" asked Gerda. Then the raven told how a boy who was not afraid of anyone came along and delighted the princess by talking with her about all the things that interested her. "Oh, that must be Kay. He is so clever," said Gerda. "I must see him." "I will see what I can do," cawed the raven, and he flew away. At evening the raven came back. "Come quickly," he said. So Gerda hurried to the castle where the raven's sweetheart was waiting. She crept up the back stairs past swift shadows of horses and knights. At last Gerda reached the princess's room. There, sleeping soundly, was a young man, but it wasn't Kay. Gerda was so disappointed that she burst into tears. Waking the prince and princess, they felt sorry for the little girl and did what they could to help her. They gave her some new boots and a golden carriage with footmen to take her on her way. But Gerda's adventures were not over. As she passed in her carriage through a dark forest, some robbers jumped out. They could see that the carriage was worth a fortune. Those robbers might well have killed Gerda at once, but a little robber girl took her back to her home. That night Gerda heard some wood pigeons cooing. "We have seen little Kay riding through the sky in the Snow Queen's sleigh." The little robber girl's pet reindeer said quietly, "The Snow Queen has her summer palace near the North Pole. I know, for I was born near there." The next morning the little robber girl spoke to Gerda. "I heard everything last night," she said. "I will let the reindeer go if he will promise to carry you to Lapland to find Kay." The reindeer jumped for joy, and Gerda climbed on his back. Night and day they flew through the forest and mountains until the reindeer pointed out the beautiful northern lights and told Gerda that they had arrived in Lapland. There was a poor cottage nearby. "You poor child," said the woman who lived there, "I'm afraid you have many miles to go yet." Once again Gerda and the reindeer flew over the snowy landscape until they reached Finland. There they met a Finnish woman who was a friend of the woman in Lapland. "Can't you give Gerda some special magic so that she can defeat the Snow Queen?" asked the reindeer. "Gerda doesn't need any special magic," said the Finnish woman. "Her good heart is all the magic she needs. Kay is with the Snow Queen. He is happy there because he has a heart of ice and a fragment of the magician's mirror in his eye. Take Gerda to the edge of the Snow Queen's garden and put her down by a bush with red berries." The reindeer did as the Finnish woman suggested, although he was sorry to leave Gerda all alone in the cold snow with her bare feet. Almost at once Gerda was surrounded by whirling snowflakes. Some seemed to threaten her, but others led her on. And so it was that Gerda came at last to the Snow Queen's palace, with its walls of snow and doors and windows of bitter winds. Only Gerda's goodness kept her warm as she walked into a huge ice chamber. There in the middle was little Kay, moving blocks of ice around as if he was trying to solve the hardest puzzle in the world. Gerda ran forward. As she threw her arms around Kay, her warm tears of joy dripped onto his face and heart, melting the ice and washing away the slivers of mirror. The warmth gradually returned to his cheeks, and he too cried at the sight of his very best friend. Outside, the reindeer was waiting. The children began their long journey home. At last they saw their own city stretching out before them. Gerda and Kay were older and wiser, but in their hearts they were children still, and all around them was warmth and light and summer. The end.